Welcome to Arnie's Class Podcast. I'm Arnie Aniel. I'm an HR development consultant, an international public speaker, a workshop facilitator, a coach, and an educator. Life is a great opportunity, and we all learn life lessons every day. This podcast is all about those lessons. Lessons like gratitude, confidence, happiness, mindset, and a lot more. Learning without action is information. Learning with action is transformation. Join me, learn, and transform yourself into a better you. Hello, Lightmates and listeners, and welcome to Arnie's Class. Another episode, another lesson, and another opportunity for you to learn. In this episode, we're going to talk about persuasion. I believe that one of the important skills that everyone should really learn and be a master of is communication. Every day we communicate. And when we communicate, most often than not, we actually persuade people. The act of persuasion is actually a way of changing a person or a group of people's attitude, beliefs, or behaviors. And every time we communicate, that's what actually we do. Sometimes we are very conscious, or we consciously do it, and sometimes unconsciously we do it. We persuade people to believe in what we say, to follow what we want them to do, and it's a very essential skill. But how can we increase our persuasive power? There are many ways, and I'm sure a lot of you out there listening, you know how to be persuasive, especially if you're in sales or you're a person like a public speaker or a manager, a leader. So how do you increase your persuasive power? Do you use reliable sources every time you persuade people? Or do you refer to policies and procedures? Or are you a person who simply make yourself likable and amiable, and in that way you can easily persuade people to believe you, to follow you? And according to Aristotle, to be persuasive, you combine ethos, logos, and pathos. Ethos means character. Your character can persuade other people. What does it mean? It means your credibility. Are you credible enough? Not for every topic, but what are the topics that you think you can easily make people believe you? Logos, which means reason. And I believe this is just about numbers, like number of years. How long have you been doing it? Figures that can support your idea or your beliefs, so people can be persuaded by your ideas. But personally, I believe that the most important part of this Aristotle's triangle is pathos, which is emotion. Because every time we make decisions, we decide through our emotion. We are emotional animals or emotional human beings. We buy things, we do things through our emotions. How about you? How do you persuade others to believe your ideas? With my special guests, I believe you're going to learn a lot. Ladies and gentlemen, listen and learn. Ladies and gentlemen, my special guest for this episode is a technology evangelist for 20 years. And now he works as a coach who helps people to become more confident and effective communicators with clients, including entrepreneurs and executives. He's also an author of The Founder's Guide to Presenting, and a host of The Pitch in the Zone. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Claudio. Claudio, thank you so much for saying yes to my invitation to be my guest. How are you, Claudio?
I'm really well. Thank you for having me, Arnie. It's a real delight to be in Arnie's class today.
And I'm very excited. Welcome to Arnie's class. I'm very excited. Claudio, you've met a lot of people from different countries, different backgrounds, and different professions. What did you see that you can consider the common problems in terms of communication?
I believe one of the the common problems that we see everywhere, in every culture, in every country, is probably related to confidence. People just have so much doubt about their own ability to communicate correctly. And so they start to go inside of their head and they are talking to themselves in the worst tonality possible. And it just doesn't help. So I think confidence is one of those themes that I see in every single culture popping up again and again and again.
I totally agree. So how do you help a person, something like they approach you and they say, oh, Claudio, please help me. I want to be an effective and confident communicator, but I believe I don't have the confidence. So how do you help this kind of people?
Yes, I believe that we are actually all born with all the confidence that we need. So to me, it's very often a process of helping them to unlearn what hurdles they have put in place instead of putting in something new. Let me give you an example. I once was on an airplane, a long flight from Los Angeles to Tokyo, tremendously long flight. And I was in the second to last row, and just the row before me, there was a little baby. And that baby was screaming and screaming and screaming the entire flight.
I can imagine.
You can imagine, you've probably been there, right?
Yeah, I've experienced that.
And so the thought that came to my mind at that point was, you see, we are all confident to speak up at an early age. We don't think, oh, what will other people think? No, the parents did that job for the kid and they tried to silence the kid, but the kid kept on screaming and screaming and screaming. So to me, that is so telling that we are actually born with all the confidence we need to speak up. But then as we grow up, we are continuously told, be quiet, don't say this, don't say that. And all of that is building a wall around us that robs us somehow of confidence. So my step is basically to try to get them to be aware that confidence is not something that we acquire later on in life, but it in fact is something that we have when we are born and we are being talked out of it.
How do you build that confidence? Because like some people are very shy, they have this fear, especially, of course, public speaking. It's not just like communicating with someone like one-on-one, but especially if there's like an audience. How do you build that kind of confidence?
Well, the first step I really usually do with clients is I'm figuring out what's going on inside of their head that makes them not confident, that makes them afraid. So I ask them and say, how do you scare yourself? And I really dig deep into the internal world that they have. Some people, they say, well, I see the audience out there and everybody has this big head and these huge eyes and they're staring at me and they're laughing at me. And that is something that they only do inside of their head. This never really happens in real life. So the first step is I want to know what specifically do they do? Do they make images or do they talk to themselves? Do they hear perhaps a teacher or a parent or an older sibling? And that is the foundation to help them become more confident. The other thing that I'm doing is I help them to become more confident about the material that they are presenting. Because if we are really confident about the material, if we know the material, if we have a lot of practice to get our message across and practice in a safe environment first, I believe that will help. You know this yourself, Arnie. I mean, you are a champion public speaker, and it probably took you a little while to get there and to get to the point where you now have that confidence where you can stand in front of 12 people as comfortably as you can stand in front of 1,000 people.
No, it took me years.
Yes, yes, it is quite a process to get there. And I believe so many people, when it comes to public speaking, I would say 99.99% of the world population, they never even think about public speaking unless they need to. Unless they're invited to some kind of an event to go speak, can you give a little speech at my wedding, or those kind of situations. And that's when people go, oh, well, are there any best practices to public speaking? And that's when they hit Google and they're trying to find that out. So our job, yours and mine, is to help people to prepare, to do that work before they must, because as soon as they must, all of a sudden time is a critical factor, because that speech will be in 2 weeks from now, that presentation will be next week, and that's very, very little time. When I coach people for really, really important presentation, these do or die kind of presentations, investor pitches or keynote presentations, this is often a process of 3 or 4 months that we are meeting on a regular basis, maybe weekly. And over that time, they're starting to build that confidence, because the more we do it, the easier it becomes.
But will you accept someone who's asking you to be their coach, but you only have like very limited time? Let's just say less than a month.
Sure.
Will you accept?
Sure, absolutely. In some cases, what we then do is we just increase the frequency. Instead of meeting once a week, we might meet daily and really get, a more immersive kind of experience. So yeah, sure, absolutely. Absolutely. Even if somebody approaches me and says, well, I have something important tomorrow, but, I will certainly help them. And it's still better to prepare well with little time than not to prepare at all. Some very smart person once said, if you fail to prepare, you prepare to fail. So to me, the preparation, it's all in the preparation.
I see. But what can you say about those people who speak or present and they rely on the technology very much, that they forget that actually they are the star of the presentation or the speech? What can you say about these people?
Well, again, it's make them become aware that they're actually doing it, because very, very often they don't know that they are using technology as a crutch, right? They're using all these kind of fancy things, or when it comes to slide design, for example, I see people using slides more as a crutch than as a backdrop, where every single word is on the slide. And to me, those slides are very, very distractive, because if you think about it, people cannot read and listen at the same time. And it's biological. When we read something, we sub-vocalize it inside of our own head. So our own voice is going, and it takes over whatever is coming from the outside. So the first step, like in any habit or in anything that could be improved, the first step is to realize that we are doing it, and then look at ways to do the same thing, to get the same results, but without the crutch that they were using before.
Let's see. So we're talking about communication. How do you measure success of communication?
Success in communication, well, it always depends, of course, on the goal, right? What is the goal? And if you can reach that goal, well, then your presentation was successful. So, for example, if you want people to download something from your website and you have 100 people in the audience, and at the end, you're looking at your web statistics and you see one person downloaded it, I would say that probably wasn't meeting the goal that you set yourself. So you could say, it wasn't all that successful. But if maybe 50 or 60 people are downloading it, then yeah, you can say, okay, that was successful. So it really, really depends on what is the goal that you're setting yourself, and how close did you get to reaching that goal.
See, but what do you think are the common barriers? Why a lot of people having this misunderstanding, miscommunication? What do you think are the most common barriers?
The most common barrier, in my opinion, is simply lack of practice, lack of experience, right? The more that they're doing it, and we met each other through Toastmasters, for example. And to me, Toastmasters is a tremendously good venue for people to get their practice in a safe environment. You know, when you think back and you learned how to ride a bicycle, that was many, many, many moons ago. And today you
Yes.
are not thinking about it anymore. You just get on that bicycle and everything works automatically. But if you really, really think back to the first couple of weeks, there was this uncertainty phase, you know, where you're on the bike and you just lost the training wheels and you just may not have that balance yet. The only way that you can get to the point where you ride that bicycle with a level of confidence is to do it, and do it often, do it frequently, so you do get enough practice.
Agree. Totally agree. So now let's talk about persuasion, because I think you are a master of persuasion. You know the art of persuasion very well. So how do you say that? Maybe how will you define the word persuasion? Of course, in the dictionary, they say it's changing one's beliefs or behaviors and attitudes. How will you define it based on your experience, Claudio?
That's pretty much it. Changing behaviors, changing beliefs, changing the mindset, right? Convincing people of something that they didn't include in their thinking before.
See, can you give us advice, or maybe can you give us techniques on how can we increase our persuasive power? How can we be more persuasive?
I'll gladly do that. Yes, sure. Only let's look at how a lot of persuasion is taking place today. It's basically somebody who has an offer, and they go out there and say, look, this is my offer. This might be something for you. Please buy. Please buy. And that has a very, very mediocre success. The key in persuasion, in my opinion, is twofold. One, you have to understand that it's all about emotions. Even in deals where millions of dollars are on the table, let's say an airline purchasing new airplanes, or a bank revamping all of their IT infrastructure, even in those situations where we look at all the facts and figures and they're comparing, still behind that there is a human being, and human beings are mostly driven by emotions. As a matter of fact, when we make a decision, we make that decision based on our feelings, and then later we use the facts and the figures, the specs and the stats to justify that decision. But the decision
after we buy, right?
Well, at least after we decided, because the decision is being done on an emotional level. That is number one. Number two is to really understand the other person.
Okay.
What drives the other person? And again, I'm encouraging people to look at the emotions behind it. So when you have an offer, do not think about what is this product, but think about what does it mean in the life of the person that I want to sell it to. I think we all agree Steve Jobs was a master communicator and a superb persuader. And if I think back to some of his keynote presentations, it is a masterclass in how to do that. For example, 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago by now, he introduced the iPod.
Oh, yes.
The first iPod. And it was a revolutionary device. Now, he could have stood up like all the other executives in high tech at that time and said, look, here is the iPad. And it is a new portable music player. It is the size of a sardine can. It is only 6.5 ounces, and it has lightning fast transfer speeds, and it stores 5 gigabytes of data. But with that, he would have told people what the device is, not what it does, and leave it up to the imagination and the knowledge of people out there to connect the dots. But 20 years ago, so many people had no idea what is 5 gigabytes. What is that this big or that big or this small? Or they had no clue, right? So if you feed them with the specs and if you feed them with what a product is, they might get lost along the way. So Steve Jobs did not introduce the iPod like that, but he simply held up the device and said, this is 1,000 songs in your pocket. And with that, he told people what the device does for them. And then later on, he doubled up and said, you can put your entire music library onto this device. Now he tells them what that really, really means in their lives. And whenever you have something to sell, like for example, the iPod, right? Before I went through the features, I talked about the size, I talked about the storage, I talked about the weight, right? And if you now take all of these features and for each of them, ask the question, what does that feature really mean? 6.5 ounces, the size of a sardine can. What does that really, really mean? Oh, that means I can put it in my pocket. 5 gigabytes, what does that mean? Well, that means about 1,000 songs. And if you do that for every single feature that you have, all of a sudden you're ending up with a list and you're looking at that list and the answer is staring you in the face. And you go like, this is how I can position the device. It's 1,000 songs in your pocket. And he did it so well, not just with the content, but also the delivery, that everybody picked up on it. And the next day in the media, you could read everywhere, Apple is coming out with a new device that puts 1,000 songs in your pocket. And from then on, it just lives by itself. So this is memorable. This is something that people share. And again, it really, really tells them, what does the device do for them? What does it mean in their daily life?
I see. Wow. That's really well said. Let's take it one by one. So you said first is emotion. So how can we identify people's emotions? Or maybe shall we start with our emotion, or it's like the emotion of other people?
It's the emotion of other people, because if you start with your own emotions, then your presentation becomes presenter-centric. It comes from the inside out. And your values and your beliefs may not be the same as those in the audience. So to do a really, really good job, you need to step back first and ask yourself, what is my ideal audience member? And create what some people call an audience avatar or a persona, a buyer persona. In marketing, this is done already for many, many years, decades. As a matter of fact, when a copywriter is sitting down to write a new ad, they're sitting down and they don't start to write the ad initially, but they think about the target user, the target audience. And so how do you do it? Well, it's a lot of research that's behind it. So for example, if you have a specific product product X. And you go like, okay, this is where I see this product going. What I recommend people is to not think of, well, this is an ideal product for the age group between 25 and 40 years old, and go like the demographics route. Though that data is important, but it's only part of a really, really good buyer's persona. So what I suggest people is to make it extremely personal. Don't think in blocks of users out there in segments of the market, but think specifically about just one person. I usually call my avatar Bob. And I say, okay, now, what does this mean to Bob, right? And when you personify it in that way, you're really, really hitting. And you can then go out to, for example, Amazon.com and read reviews that people leave for that specific product X. You're going out and you're going to Amazon, you look, okay, product X, and then scroll all the way down to the comment section. And that's where you find these nuggets that are so useful, where people tell you how they feel about a specific product, why this one sucks, why they love that one. And you're going in and you're looking at the absolutely specific words that they're using. And based on that, you're taking one step after another in better understanding the actual audience and what the feelings are that your product relates to in that audience. So you want to know, what are their hopes? What are their dreams? Because in essence, if you think about persuasion, persuasion is only a process of transformation in some sense. And we are assisting that process. Too many people, they go out there and they see themselves as the hero that saves the day for their clients. I have the goodies. I am your hero. And if you give me money, then I will be the hero in your story. But that doesn't seem to be the right approach. A better approach is to make your audience, your client, your customer, the hero.
Not yourself.
Not yourself. And see yourself merely as a guide. See yourself as a guide who helps them on their journey of transformation. I'm a huge fan of one particular story structure. You've heard it. I know you know it, Arnie. It's the hero's journey, right? Yes. And Joseph Campbell, back in 1949, wrote a book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces. And this was actually a work in comparative mythology. So he looked at all of the mythology going back thousands of years and looked at all of the stories that we told in each of the different societies. And he found out that no matter what culture it was, there is a certain commonality behind the stories that we are telling. And this story, he called it the hero's journey. And the hero's journey basically starts, usually it starts out, and if you look at, you know, literature, if you look at movies out there, so many of the movies today, they're following that hero's journey. For example, The Matrix.
The same approach, right?
Yeah,
the same approach.
The same kind of pattern, right? If you look at the movie The Matrix and you compare it to Harry Potter, or you compare it to Star Wars, well, if you really, really take a step back, it's more or less the same story. You have a hero. Well, he's not a hero yet. You have a common person going through their daily life. And then all of a sudden, something happens. Something that we call the call to adventure happens. For example, for Neo, if you have seen The Matrix,
Of course.
Neo, he's at home late at night and he's hacking away in his spare time and he nods off. And at one point he wakes up and he looks at his screen, and on the screen there are the words, wake up, Neo, follow the white rabbit. So that for him, and in the story of The Matrix, that was the call to adventure. That's usually the first step. The second step is typically an initial refusal. Typically we go like, no, I can't do that. I can't do that. Whatever it is. For Neo, if you remember back to the story, he was standing outside on a ledge outside of his office. The building was a skyscraper way, way high up. And he's looking down into the city and he utters the words, I can't do this. And he crawls back.
Yeah.
And this is very, very often in our own personal lives, exactly the same way. So we are presented with an opportunity, we are presented with a call to adventure, but there is something inside of us that usually doesn't make us jump on the opportunity in the first moment.
We usually reject the idea first.
We very often reject the idea, and that rejection can be only a few seconds before we come to our senses, or it can be quite a long time, days or weeks, before people say, yeah, I really, let's get going. And what often pushes us over that threshold are people around us that nudge us a little bit and say, hey, Arnie, didn't you 2 months ago say you wanted to write a book? Well, have you started yet? Have you? And those are the nudges that we get, right? And in Neo's case, in The Matrix, it was when he was at the nightclub and he saw a friend, and his girlfriend had a white rabbit tattooed on the back of her shoulder.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. And that for him was that nudge. So he followed the white rabbit and he met Morpheus, who presented him with the red pill and the blue pill. And that was the next step in the hero's journey to actually cross the threshold, to start that journey in earnest. And then, the movie, the story continues with lots of action. And of course, our hero couldn't do it themselves. So they have helpers around them. They have guides, they have aides, they have assistants out there that help them through the journey. They transfer skills to our hero and in essence prepare them for the big epic event that's taking place. In Neo's case, that was the final showdown with Agent Smith. So these are only like the first 6 or 7 steps of the hero's journey. But it is so important to understand that in essence, we are all going through our own mini hero's journeys every single day of our lives. Whether you buy a house where you say, okay, that call to adventure is that thought where maybe your partner is saying, well, we should really, we are wasting money here by renting an apartment. Let's look at, and ultimately, the epic event is when you turn the key for the first time and unlock your new home's door and move in, right? So whatever it is, you can take any project that you're working on and you can apply that hero's journey to it. So if you understand that we are all on a hero's journey, every single one of us, and on that journey, we are the heroes of our own story. And then basically realize that, okay, now we have billions and billions and billions, because every person has more than one journey that they are on concurrently.
I'm sure. Yes.
Absolutely. So we have billions and billions and billions of journeys out there. And from time to time, journeys intersect. Yours intersects with mine. That's what we call communication. This is when communication takes place. And then if we stick together and our communication takes place over an extended period of time, we are forming a relationship. And when you are looking at that, it is a small mindset shift that has huge impact on the other side when you are approaching every single one of your clients with, this person is on a journey, and you're trying to figure out where along the way are they? Are they very early? Do they need a nudge? Or have they already decided? Have they already taken the red pill? And now they need assistance to get prepared for their big epic event. And if you're looking at it like that, and you're making every single one of your clients the hero, and see yourself as a guide, a very special guide, because you do have superpowers. And when you are helping them, it's a question of how can you transfer your superpower to them, so that they can go through that transformation, that journey of transformation, more easily.
So it's very important that we help them identify where are they in the journey in order to help them.
Absolutely, because then you basically, that leads you to your next step, right? If somebody needs a nudge, that's a totally different message that you want to communicate than if they already took the red pill and they are now looking for help specifically to do this task or that task. And so, yes, it's very important to not only understand the structure of these journeys, but also where the other person is at.
I see. But Claudio, what happens if, like, for example, we're dealing with an audience, not just one, but two, but not just two, but maybe 10, 20, 100. How we do that? How do we apply this hero's journey of persuading these people? Like, we have 100 people, probably some of them are like maybe at the beginning, the others already took the red pill, the others took blue pill, the others, like, they don't know what to do. So how do we deal with that? How do we apply that approach?
Sure. So if persuasion takes place one-on-one, then it's easy to identify this. You can even ask people, But yes, if you have a group with 100 people in your audience, everybody might be at a different place. So what you do is you basically weave into your presentation those arguments that are necessary and important and useful for those that are still pre-nudge, if you want so, and for those that already are somewhat on their way. However, I want to clarify here that sometimes when we go out and we talk to 100 people, we want to resonate with 100 people. But
which is impossible, I think.
Yes, that is simply not possible, right?
You'll go crazy, I think.
So this is where that audience avatar, that persona comes in again. Okay. Because when you present, you want to present to those people who you really know are a potential customer, a potential client. And you know that based on their values, based on their dreams and hopes, and speak to them. If you speak to one person in the audience and hit their beliefs in such a way, you're certain that you will also hit other people in the audience, but not everybody. And I think this is one of the errors that we make when we are going out there presenting. We want to please everybody. But if you try to please everybody, you might end up with nobody really listening.
Correct. I can totally agree on that.
Yeah. If you want to please just a specific personality, then you will resonate with those that are of the same makeup.
So Claudio, it's not important to create like 2 or 3 or 5 personas. You're telling us just one persona is enough.
Not necessarily, because, you know, in some cases, you might want to cover more of them, but you still do not reach all the 100 people there, right?
Correct.
So for example, if you're out there, Arnie, and you're selling your consulting services, your coaching services, right?
Yes.
For example, for some people, their pain might be confidence.
Okay.
That's one of the feelings that you know, okay, a certain number of people in there, they struggle with confidence. But for other people, it may be different reasons why they're looking at potentially getting coaching. For example, some people might need some language input, you know, or maybe it is the structure of their presentation that they need some help with. So depending on that, your message, of course, will vary. And if you're talking to a mixed audience out there, you know, you can spend 30 seconds on the confidence issue and 20 seconds on the language issue, and all wrap it together with a nice bow so that the presentation is enjoyable for every single person out there.
To make sure that you cater and you relate with the people's needs, different people's needs in your audience.
That's correct. Yes.
I see. So talking about this persuasion, and then you're talking about this hero's journey and all this stuff, what other techniques that they can do? Because normally we say that it's easier said than done. What other techniques you can share with us or to the listeners? Because I'm sure some of the listeners are saying, yeah, it's easier said than done. It's for you because you have experience, you have the knowledge. But what other practical techniques that in order for them to increase their persuasive power?
Yeah. The first one that I work a lot with clients goes back to that it's all about emotions. I firmly believe that communication, there are parts of communication that take place outside of our awareness. Let me step back a moment.
Okay.
We all walk through life with our 5 senses hopefully wide open. But these senses, they are in some way limited. You cannot see all of the visual range that's out there. You cannot see, for example, infrared. You cannot see it unless you are putting on special goggles or using some kind of an instrument. You cannot see infrared. You cannot hear the whole range. For example, we hear somewhere between 20 hertz and 20 kilohertz, somewhere in that range, meaning if something has a higher pitch, it escapes our awareness. For example, a dog whistle. You cannot hear a dog whistle, but dogs, of course, can. So these are just 2 examples to demonstrate that it starts already with a limited sensory apparatus that we have available. Okay, so in order to really start to resonate with other people, you need to be able to communicate in a way where you cover even those areas that are outside of our standard perception.
Okay. Yes.
So for example, your TV remote at home. You have a TV, you have a remote. You can sit in front of your TV, you can flip through the channels, but you cannot see that beam. You cannot hear it. You cannot feel it. Even if you try to touch it, you cannot feel it. You cannot smell it. You cannot taste it. But of course, it's there because the channels are changing. And I believe emotions are very, very similar to that beam. Emotions transfer from one person to the next person, but they escape our awareness. I don't want to go into metaphysics, because sometimes it's really just that they escape our awareness in a way where we are just not paying attention to it, because we are listening to the words. We might not always look at the body language. And so the body language comes in under the radar. People do not realize that you're doing something with your body language that they either like or dislike, but they're getting a feeling about you, either positive or negative, based on some things. And if you ask them, why do you feel like that? They go like, I don't know, it's just feeling I have. So with the feelings, it's so important, therefore, to go first. If you want somebody to become excited about your coaching services, you have to be excited about these coaching services yourself. If you talk to them about the worst case scenario, just for the balance, right, the pain, you have to be able to, while you are communicating that, to feel that pain yourself in a way that it transfers to the other person, like that beam from the remote control, outside of the sensory awareness, but nevertheless, it hits home. So this to me is the first and most important step. If you don't feel what you want your audience to feel, how can you expect them to feel what you want them to feel? You have to be able to do that yourself. So that to me is number one. Number two is perhaps a little bit more practical. It's, for example, the use of adjectives. When we use adjectives, and in the book that you were mentioning before, The Founder's Guide to Presenting, there is a whole list of about 50 or 60 different powerful adjectives. Awesome, exciting, whatever you have. And using adjectives to describe either your idea, your product, your service, or just components and parts of it can make a huge, huge difference as well. I was watching, and you know, I'm a huge, huge fan of learning from the best. And when it comes to communications, I believe even in today's time, we can learn a lot from the presenters at Apple. And Apple did an event a couple months ago. And in that event, they were announcing a new color for an iPhone. It wasn't a new iPhone. It wasn't a new idea or a new product. It simply was the addition of purple to the lineup of colors. But when you listen to Tim Cook announce this product, in just a few seconds, he used about 4 or 5 different adjectives, like, and isn't it a beautiful color? And then communicate those adjectives like they're meant to be communicated, with enough stress on syllables and really getting that feeling across somehow. So Apple is, and it started with Steve Jobs. He was a master of using colorful adjectives to create excitement for whatever he was talking about. And then the third component to evoke emotions in your audience is, of course, storytelling. We love stories. We love to listen to stories, watch stories, read stories, tell stories, because stories, again, they resonate at a totally different level. And if you combine these 3 components together, go first, feeling what you want them to feel, express those feelings with colorful adjectives, but be careful to not overdo it, because If you overdo it, then yeah, it comes across as a blatant attempt to manipulate.
Okay.
So be careful. And then, of course, the third one, wrap this into stories where people can really, really relate to those stories.
I see. I totally agree, because emotion is contagious. Whatever you send there, you will receive that.
You got
If
it.
you're energetic, people will be energetic. You cannot expect people to be enthusiastic if you don't even have the enthusiasm yourself. And
Correct.
just like what you said, the use of adjectives, but not too much, or else probably people will conceive or perceive you as a person who's not authentic because it's too much. It becomes unreal. So, of course, if there's a persuasion, on the other side, there is objection. So how
Yep.
do we deal with objections?
The first defense against objections is usually to inoculate against the objection, because if you've been out there peddling your product or your service for a little while, you've heard so many of the objections already. Bring them up as part of your pitch. Bring them up as part of your presentation. And that way, you're taking the wind out of the sail of the person that sits there so critical and goes like, yeah, but what about? What if? What if? You're basically giving them an answer. And when you do that, something truly magical happens, because even the most critical people, then they look at you and say, you know what, this person is really, really honest. And honesty is one of the most important parts, because if you are honest, you are coming across as authentic automatically.
Correct.
And so that to me is the first level of defense against any kind of objection that people may have.
Be honest with your answers.
Not just be honest with your answer, but inoculate them. Bring up the objection before they can. But if they're bringing up a new objection that you have never even heard, right? Number one, listen very carefully to what are they objecting against, because they might have some really valid reasons why they say, well, for me, this just doesn't fit. And then you can make a decision then and there. Do I want to continue pushing, or do I respect the other person and say, well, okay, I see that currently on the journey that they are at and the stage that they're in, they might not need this product. This product might not be the right product. And so again, it boils down to honesty. I'm often advising people to not try to use any of the sleazy tricks that are out there, because if you get people to ultimately buy something, but you do it because you pushed them into it and you use some really fancy sales techniques, what happens a day or two later is buyer's remorse. And you're either looking at the return, or you're looking at some bad reviews and some bad energy that's starting to develop out there. And to me, life is too short and the market, the world is too big to have to say, I have to make every single sales, because that's just simply not possible.
So we just have to accept that there will always be some objections, that we just have to accept that this product or our product is not for them. So let's just move on and then move to the next customer, move to the next client. I see.
That's right.
Good one.
And the better you define your persona, the better you define that avatar, of course, the more your language and your words will resonate, so that you minimize objections already on that level as well.
See, with all these things that we are discussing, Claudio, can they find this in your new book, The Founder's Guide to Presenting? Can they find all these things in the book?
Yes. It's actually a short book. It's amazing, because I took a long time to write it, and I was often reminded of Mark Twain's quote. You've probably seen this quote out there. He once wrote a letter to a friend, and he started out apologizing. He said, "I am so sorry for writing a long letter. I just didn't have enough time to write a short one." So very, very often it takes a longer time, even in presentations as well, to get your message across very concisely with as few words as possible to have a certain impact. So I took my time to really concisely describe what I was just talking about right now. But the book starts out with making people aware that it's all about emotions, then goes into language, how words and not just adjectives, but also how metaphors and analogies become very, very useful tools in your bag of tricks. And then because it is written for founders and entrepreneurs, it also goes into the investor pitches, because those are very, very specific kind of presentations. All of a sudden, you're not selling your product or service anymore. You are selling your company. You are selling parts of your company. You're looking for an investment. And so an investor might never even use your product. So the questions that you need to answer there have to be slightly different. But the goal behind it all, is really that whenever you present persuasively, that you get people to love your product, number one. Number two, to like you as a person. And number three, to trust your business, to trust your company. These are the three emotions that you want them to walk out with at the end. If only one of them is missing,
then it's not going to work.
Yeah, you're fighting an uphill battle, right? It becomes so much more difficult if they don't like you. They might love the product. They might have faith in your company, but there's something about the seller, then the deal most likely will fall apart. Or they can really, really like you, but they don't think so highly of the product. They don't see the use behind it. They're not falling in love with it. Again, uphill battle. I'm not saying that you will not be able to sell, but it becomes an uphill battle.
Let's see. Claudio, how long have you been in Thailand?
I have been in Thailand for about 12 years now.
12 years.
Yeah.
How does language play in being persuasive? Because in Thailand, they don't speak English. So it's a different, do you call it a different game, or how will you describe the role of language in becoming more powerful in persuading people?
Oh, it is very, very important. That's why I devote an entire chapter in my book on language, right? And so, yeah, it really, these kind of principles, they work across all languages, because ultimately, no matter what language that you feel, we all, no matter what language you speak, we all feel the same kind of emotions. We all know love and hate and attraction and excitement, and you know,
emotion is universal.
The emotions, that's the universal language. So the words that you use to get to that, they might be vastly different. The structure behind using those words might be vastly different, but in essence, the goal is exactly the same, no matter what language you speak.
Language, I see. Can you speak Thai, Claudio?
Yeah, a little bit, you know, enough to buy food and to not go hungry. But I would not be able to do a conversation like we are having right now fluently in Thai. And I'm horribly ashamed about it, because I always looked at people that live more than 10 years in a country, and looked at it almost like as a weakness. if they are not developing the skills in those 10 years to actually communicate successfully and fluently in any type of situations. But I think we have one distinct disadvantage when it comes to learning, and that is because we speak English, so many Thais, they want to practice their own English, so they don't give us a lot of chances to practice our Thai. And so I'm still learning. I can read, I can write, but again, it's a question of fluency and to what extent that I'm able to communicate.
And just like what you said, the opportunity to actually use the language, because I think Thai people can use English with us more than us using Thai with them.
Absolutely. And I really have to say, you know, in the last 12 years since I have been here, and this is something a lot of people don't know, when I moved to Thailand, the first few years, I actually worked as an English teacher at government schools. Yes. Because, yes, because I said to myself, you know, now I'm moving to a different country. And the first thing that I want to do when I move to a new country is to fully understand the culture in that country. Now,
agree, it's very important.
Fully understand is a very, very strong term, because can we ever fully understand another, another culture, you know, in the same way as it is having grown up, especially if you are a little bit older already. Okay, but I went and said, you know what, the best way to learn about culture is to spend as much time with people that are somewhere between 12 and 20 years of age. That age group, to me, is so much more important to learn about the culture than my peers, because my peers, they're communicating and teaching me cultural aspects that are currently maybe already kind of like on the way out, because also in Thailand, you know, there has been a huge shift. And in the 12 years that I have been living here, I believe there has been so much progress by Thai people to learn English. I mean, it's, you know, and I believe in another 10 years, 15 years from now, English won't be a huge hurdle anymore, because there is so much progress that I'm seeing being made here.
Agree. I've been here longer than you, and I really see how Thai people use English now than before.
That's because Claudio, you are an English teacher as well. So thank yourself, pat yourself on the back.
Yeah, I used to teach English, wow, many years here in Thailand. Claudio, with your experience, with your background, with your qualifications, what is the greatest lesson? This can be in terms of communication, persuasion, or in your life in general. What is the greatest lesson that you've learned that you can share with the listeners? And of course, share with me as well.
There are so many. It's actually very, very difficult to pick. The first one that now just popped at the top of all of these is probably this, that when you communicate, do it with undivided attention. I see, especially in today's world, people are getting so quickly distracted. I have recently talked to someone, and he's one of these influencers with more than 1 million Twitter followers, and
wow.
Yeah, he has a TV program now in the United States, and I was talking with him, and seriously, every 2 or 3 minutes, his phone started to buzz, and he took it and had a quick look at the phone, and in that moment, you're just breaking that wonderful
connection,
atmosphere, the connection, the rapport that we have. You're breaking it with that, because again, I so strongly believe that there are aspects of communication that escape our awareness. There is something going on a different level, and if you are, and this is an extreme example, but we can see it today all the time, where people, as soon as their phone buzzes, even if they don't hear it, but it's on vibrate, they have this urge to take it out and look at it. And depending on what it is, say, oh, moment, I have to quickly respond. And to me, when you communicate, do it with undivided attention. Put your phone off vibrate, turn the ringer off so you don't even know what's coming in, because when you finished talking with one person, well, it's still early enough to have a look at your phone and say, what did I miss in the last 30 minutes or 60 minutes? So to me, if we can get back to undivided attention while communicating, I think our communication will become so much more effective and also pleasant.
I totally agree with that. Sometimes not even without the vibration, or even without the rings or all those sounds, people have the tendency to obsessively check all the time.
Yeah.
Oh my.
Yeah.
With this, if you're going to write, or maybe someone else is going to write your life into a book, what will be the book like, and what will be the title?
I think the title could be something along the line of An Extraordinary Ordinary Life.
Wow.
An extraordinary ordinary life. I'm just a total ordinary kind of person. But when I look back in my life, I think I had so many extraordinary moments. And I think all of us can say that. We all are normal people. We are ordinary people with extraordinary experiences. So I think it will be somewhere around that theme or that topic.
I see. But is there any particular, because you mentioned about moment in your life, is there a particular moment in your life that really made an impact of who you are at the moment?
Oh, absolutely. Do we have another hour?
We're almost actually towards the end now, Claudio.
I know.
I'm sure that, just particular moment that you think that moment really made an impact of who you are.
Yes, absolutely. And I can answer it with this. Before I moved to Thailand, I'm originally from Switzerland, but before I moved to Thailand, I lived in the United States for almost 20 years. And
wow.
I was always an avid reader. So by the time I left the United States, I had close to 5,000 books in my bookshelves. I had a mini library at home. Every single room had bookshelves and books in there. And I gave them all away before I moved to Thailand, with the exception of two. I took 2 books with me because those are the books that did exactly that, what you just said. They changed my outlook, they changed my beliefs, and they had such a strong impact. The first one of these 2 books is called The Global Brain by Peter Russell. The Global Brain, you've heard maybe of the Gaia theory. The Gaia theory says that the Earth is a living organism in itself. And Peter Russell based the global brain on that belief that, yes, okay, let's assume the Earth is a living organism. What would the role of the human being be on that planet or in that organism? And the book then goes into that we are basically the neurology of this planet, or the brain in this planet. And it's a fascinating read. There is this one section where he says, imagine you are a tiny, tiny little flea and you are living on a big elephant. And you've always lived on that elephant. Your family lived on that elephant. You were born there and you go to school on the elephant. You go shopping on that elephant. You do everything on that elephant. But then one day, one of your friends, he learns how to jump so high up that he can look at the elephant from outside and he realizes, oh, wow, this isn't some kind of a static rock or something. This is actually another living organism. And I believe we reached this phase as humans when we went out to space for the first time. We all know the famous image is called blue marble. The blue marble is that first image of the Earth from out of space. And if you now take this, right, you see this as an evolutionary step. We now have gotten to the point where we actually can go out so far that we can comprehend the whole thing as one. Now, here is the other point that he made in there. Imagine you are a brain cell in a human brain, right? In a human brain, but not in a grown-up person, but rather in a fetus. So imagine if you're looking at how a brain develops. After conception, the brain starts to add cells. One cell after another, after another, after another. But this process of adding cells comes to a halt somewhere in the 12th to 14th week. From that time on, it's not, the main mission of the brain is not to add more cells, but the mission is to connect the existing cells with each other. So imagine you are a small little cell in the brain of a fetus that's about in the 12th week. And you're sitting there and you're seeing all these other cells popping up left, right, around you, behind you, in front of you. And you're looking at this and go like, oh my, oh my, oh my, you know, our resources are getting so thin. I hardly can breathe anymore. There is such an overpopulation, until at one point, your neighboring cell nudges you and says, Arnie, I just figured it out. The purpose we are here is to communicate. Because if our user, that living organism around us, if they put the hand on a hot stove, then we need to communicate all the way over to that one cell that can say to the hand, lift up, lift up, lift up, because each cell is specialized. Each cell has a specific purpose. One is detecting the heat. The other one is moving the muscles. And to get that message over there, that's really the purpose behind it. And this is what the global brain, the book, The Global Brain, is all about. It was written in the early 1980s, and I read it fairly shortly after it was published. I was maybe about 20 years old. And to me, it left such a tremendous impact into, yeah, of course, this is just a theory, but it's a theory that I like. It's a theory that I find useful. If you say, okay, if it's all about connecting each other, and if you're looking at human, you know, the history over the last couple of thousand years, you will notice that almost every significant invention has somewhere the purpose of getting us together, starting with the wheel, and then, you know, the wagon and the trains and whatever it is to get us physically closer together. And now over the last 50, 60 years, technology that helps us to communicate with each other, so that today I can sit here somewhere in a remote spot here in Thailand, but I can communicate with practically everybody on this planet, no matter where they are. And so that book left a tremendous impact on me. The other book is called Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion. It was written by Robert Cialdini, but I will not go into any more details because I write about those key messages in quite some detail in the book. Exactly.
I see. Wow. last question. As much as it's getting more interesting, but of course, something that starts will always have an end. If there's one advice that you can give to all the listeners right there, especially those who are younger than you, Claudio, what will it be?
Well, that would link back to, communicate with intent, to communicate without interruption. I think that is one of the suggestions that I would make. But of course, there are many, many other ones, and quite at the top of the list. And amazingly enough, it's my job, communication. Many of them have to do with communication. Is to really spend some time learning about communication that is outside of the regular reading and writing and whatever we have learned in school, because there is so much that we can do with language, and to be a lifelong learner. Never give up on learning, because number one, every single day we discover new things about how the world works. You're never done learning.
Yes.
And if you do learn, I think, spend some time on learning how to communicate with ease, how to communicate concisely, and really, really make every single interaction that you have a pleasant experience for both of the people that are involved in the communication.
Thank you very much. Very well said, Claudio. Thank you so much. So, Claudio, how can the listeners contact you? Like your Facebook, please share with them, and then how to buy your book.
Yeah,
The Founder's Guide to Presenting.
I do have a website, and the website is Sennhauser.com. So it's my last name, SENNHAUSER.com. There is, of course, a link to the book. It's available on Amazon.com. And there is also contact information, including my calendar. So if any of your listeners are interested in learning a little bit more, feel free to hop on my calendar for 15 or 20 minutes and continue the discussion over there.
Thank you very much. Again, thank you so much, Claudio. And thank you very much to all the listeners for listening. It's been a wonderful episode. And if you like this episode, please share with your family and friends and subscribe. Thank you so much. And until our next episode, thank you so much.
Thank you, Arnie. Thanks.
Thank you very much.